Good day to you, the viewers of Poland Daily Culture. My name is Maria Kądzielska, and we are talking about the complexity of the war in Ukraine and everything was going to be brought through it. I, in my hands, are holding the book, The War of Our Times, and with me in the studio is Michał Werczuk, one of the co-authors of this book. Michał, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we just were mentioning about the fact how that the consequences of this conflict, which are also the cultural consequences, the Ukrainians will have to fight and work for many years, and I would say for another generation, if not two generations, because the amount of atrocities which Russian soldiers did against the Ukrainian nation, not only killing people, not only destroying their houses, but also destroying the culture and stealing the culture, are impossible. And you mentioned this in your chapter, which is the power of culture itself.
The art of freedom, I call it.
And the art of freedom, you called it this way.
Yeah.
A wonderful chapter showing that many Ukrainians, when the war started, they sort of needed to decide, do they feel pro-Russian or do they feel pro-Ukrainian? Do you think that most of them chose actually the side of Ukraine?
So during the research, I actually talked with many, few generations of Ukrainians, and in my opinion, even the older ones who had a really big time, difficult time to actually convert into the Ukrainian in themselves, even though they were born and raised in Ukraine. They were fed by the Russian propaganda. They were taught Russian at school, in school, and they were seeing Russian television, Russian radio, and they were hearing Russian on the streets, even though they were still living in Ukraine. And they were in fact Ukrainians. And since the war started in 2014, they couldn't decide on which side they should be, on which front. And after the war, the full escalation invasion started in 2022, they realized they're Ukrainian in their hearts. And even though they were born and raised on a Russian culture, Russian propaganda, and they were fed by this Russian horrible propaganda, I'm sorry for saying that one more time, they decided that they are ashamed of that. They decided, they felt, they don't want to acknowledge that anymore, and they even forced their own kids not to speak Russian.
This is one thing. When we took people as well over to our house, I have this reality about the fact that the mother, she spoke Russian to her parents because they only spoke Russian, but to her children she forced them and for herself to use only Ukrainian, so they will be raised with the Ukrainian language and in this mentality as well, which is an important change which happened only sort of through this war and because of this war, and it's I would say a jewel. So this nation is a process. This is sort of what we watch right now. Is this the process of giving birth to the nation, or fully creating it, melting it together? Let's say this way.
Because you need to remember that in 1991, I remember there was independence referendum, and they voted yes for being independent from the Soviet Union or Russia itself, right? But for many years they were still on the heavy influence of the Kremlin, and for many years that hasn't changed. And Putin did one thing, many good things, in fact, for his side of propaganda, but he overplayed his card. I mean, he thought that he played that well that he can invade Ukraine and take it without a shot. And
that didn't happen.
And it didn't happen. And the thing that he got the opposite effect of what he expected. So he united Ukrainian nation, and
in a way it never happened before.
Never happened before. That's why I'm writing about it, and I hope that they actually he united Polish and Ukrainian people. And I hope that we prove that in our book.
Absolutely. This is also the message of the book, the friendship, the great friendship between the Ukrainian and Polish nations, which started and was through this war, and we do hope it will flourish for many, many years and many generations. And thank you for watching our show.